And welcome back to Hardball. Democratic Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida is a member of the Appropriations Committee, and Republican Congressman Dan Burton of Indiana is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and led congressional hearings on President Clinton's pardons and commutations. Congressman Burton, I want to start with you. You just heard Fuad Ajami compare Scooter Libby to our soldiers in Iraq, and we heard from Paul Reichoft, who actually served in Iraq, who said, no way. Do you consider Scooter Libby a soldier in the war in Iraq?
I'm not going to get into that argument that you just completed. What I'm going to say is this. Selective judgment and criticism is something I think is terrible. Bill Clinton pardoned terrorists. He pardoned people who broke the law. He himself committed perjury and was never disbarred. He had a temporary suspension, but that was it. He never went to jail. He committed perjury, told the American people lies.
Congressman Burton, let's get this straight. You supported Bill Clinton's impeachment for perjury and obstruction of justice, right?
Yes, I did.
But now you support the commutation for Scooter Libby for perjury and obstruction of justice.
I think that Scooter Libby, being in the position that he was in, made a big mistake.
But you don't think he should spend a single day in jail for that mistake, even though you were willing to impeach a president who was elected twice?
Was Bill Clinton, did he serve any time? Did Bill Clinton get any penalty at all? Was he disbarred?
Yeah, history judged him pretty harshly, but the point is,
well, it's going to judge Scooter Libby as well. But, you know, don't be selective in your judgment. You know, I know you're a strong Democrat and a liberal, but be fair.
You should have seen my coverage of Bill Clinton during the pardon. I was covering your hearing, Congressman, for the fact of the matter is. But let's get back to this point. The point is that you believe that when it's perjury and obstruction of justice involving somebody who probably has information about the vice president, that information that's no longer going to get out, it's fine for him not to spend a single day in jail, but it's fine when a Democrat commits perjury and obstruction of justice for them to be impeacched, right?
Did Bill Clinton go to jail? I don't remember that. Did Bill Clinton?
You tried to impeach him. You tried to
but he was not convicted of the impeachment. He didn't go to jail. He was prosecuted, going to be prosecuted for perjury and lose his license to practice law. And you never said a thing about that. And
actually, I did. As a matter of fact, I covered every one of your hearings when I was working in my former job. But let's go to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You believe that President Clinton should not have been impeached. Is that correct?
Well, I was in the Florida House of Representatives when that impeachment was prosecuted. So, you know, at the time, no, I didn't think that President Clinton should be impeached. But I think the important thing to note that my colleague is conveniently leaving out is that President Clinton, unlike Mr. Libby, was not convicted. He was prosecuted by the House. He was impeached. He was not convicted by the Senate, unlike Mr. Libby, who was prosecuted and convicted by a jury of his peers, had a judge hand down the sentence, and then had the President of the United States swoop in and rescue him from that sentence in contradiction to his own Department of Justice's advocacy just 2 weeks ago for a similar sentence of 33 months for the same crime that a government official was convicted of. Victor Rita was convicted of obstruction of justice and lying to prosecutors, and he got 33 months in jail. The Department of Justice supported vehemently that conviction and that sentence in front of the Supreme Court, and instead, the President, for Scooter Libby, a different standard for the same crime, there is apparently no amount of time in jail that's appropriate. This is an example of hypocrisy of immeasurable proportions. It's obvious that this administration has no shame, at all, and they continue to demonstrate how they have no shame.
My response is that Bill Clinton lied to a grand jury twice.
You desperately want to make this about Bill Clinton, and this is about President Bush and the fact that his administration has spent the last 6.5 years operating as if the law does not apply to them. And
Congressman Schultz, let him go with this whole idea about lying to the grand jury, because I'm intrigued with where he's going.
You know what, you're right.
Go ahead, Congressman
I'm going to sit back and let him cook his own goose.
Bill Clinton committed perjury twice. He was going to be indicted and he was going to be prosecuted, but because of his position...
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
And he spent $25,000. He lost his license to practice law for about 6 or 7 months, and then he got it all back. He didn't go to jail for perjury. He didn't go to jail for lying.
Congressman Burton, you would have preferred if President Clinton had been prosecuted. So here's the question. How much time should somebody spend in jail if they are convicted of perjury and obstruction of justice? Should they spend 1 day? Should they spend 3 weeks? Should they spend 3 months?
I think the same rule of law should be applied to everybody, including President Bill Clinton, and it was not. And he also pardoned...
Really? Well, the Senate didn't, let me remind you, the Senate didn't convict him. So the same rule of law applied to him. I feel...
That was a different situation.
What would have... Exactly. It was a different situation that you are trying to compare to this situation. That's the only argument you've made for the last 2 or 3 minutes. It is not comparable. The President Clinton was not convicted by the Senate, and what would have happened to him if he was? He would have been removed from office.
That's
appealable to no one.
That's
appealable
right.
to no one. In this case, Scooter Libby was convicted.
But the perjury was a different...
Who rescued him? The President of the United States.
The perjury is...
They was both accused of perjury,
let me know when you want me to talk.
Both accused of obstruction of justice. Feel free to go ahead.
The perjury charge was entirely different from the impeachment, and you know that. He was charged with perjury for lying to a grand jury, not once but twice, and to the American people. He looked right in the camera and says, I want to tell you something. And the American people know that. Now, let me just say one more thing, and then you can say what you want to. He pardoned terrorists, the Puerto Rican terrorists. He pardoned people who are drug dealers. He pardoned Mark Rich, who was the #2 wanted by the FBI and who they tried to get for years, and he never even was even allowed to go to trial. Clinton pardoned him. He tried to pardon other people that his brother and his wife was trying to get pardoned.
Burton, given that Mark Rich's attorney was Scooter Libby, I'm even more surprised that you would support a commutation of Scooter Libby. Furthermore, I think that there are going to be a lot of people sit in prison today in Florida and in central Indiana who also want pardons and commutations, so we're going to be wondering, why not me? But in any case, Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Congressman Dan Burton are staying with us. Up next, we will talk about the war in Iraq as another Republican senator declares his independence. How many more will follow? And how long can President Bush ignore them? You're watching Hardball, only on MSNBC. Welcome back to Hardball. We're back with Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Congressman Dan Burton. Here's what Republican Senator Pete Domenici said yesterday, quote, "We cannot continue asking our troops to sacrifice indefinitely while the Iraqi government is not making measurable progress," Domenici said. "I do not support an immediate withdrawal from Iraq or a reduction in funding for our troops, but I do support a new strategy that will move our troops out of combat operations and on the path to coming home." Congressman Burton, this falls on the heels of one of your colleagues, Congressman Doolittle, who said today that he also supports the Iraq Study Group plan. What do you make of all of this?
Well, there's two things that I would like to say. First of all, I agree with Joe Lieberman. I think he understands the situation very well. He knows what the stakes are. If we pull out of there, that's going to create a vacuum that's going to be filled by Iran and the terrorists, and it's going to be a bigger problem that we're going to have to face down the road. We already know there's terrorist attacks that are taking place around the world. That's not going to go away, and if we create a vacuum over there, it's going to give them a base of operations from which to launch attacks worldwide.
But, Congressman, your Republican colleagues don't believe that now. They believe that we're making more of a mess of the situation by staying there.
Well, don't generalize. You're talking about 3 senators. I haven't seen an overwhelming number of Republicans in the House. The surge will not be judged until September. Congress gave General Petraeus until September and to give us a report. I don't know why everybody's jumping the gun right now. Let's wait till September and see what it looks like and then judge.
Did you ask your Indiana colleague Dick Lugar about why he's making a judgment as early as next week?
I have great respect for Dick Lugar, but we don't always agree. That doesn't mean I don't think he's a great senator, but on this issue I have a different point of view.
Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, a number of Republicans and moderate Democrats do seem to be lining up behind this idea of endorsing, I think it's the Salazar proposal in the Senate, there'll be something equivalent in the House, where you essentially back what the Iraq Study Group recommended, which calls for withdrawal of most U.S. troops by March. I know that some Democrats like yourself want it to be sooner, but would you accept a withdrawal by March?
Yeah, I would, and I have voted as such. What we need to do is endorse what the Iraq Study Group said at the time, which was to shift from a combat-focused mission to a training mission, and that's those are the proposals that the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate that have put forward. It is clear that senior Republican leaders in the Senate are now beginning to sign on to that notion. Unfortunately, the Republican leadership in the House continues to be apologists for the administration, and they continue to fail to see that this is a failed policy in Iraq, that the American people no longer and never did support it because it was prosecuted under false pretenses to begin with.
But Congressman Schultz, what's wrong with Congressman Burton's point about that the escalation has only been fully implemented for a month? What's wrong with giving it another couple of months to see how it plays out?
How many more soldiers have to die? I mean, how many more tours of duty do we have to send them on? I've been to Walter Reed, met with the soldiers who have had their legs and their arms blown off, completely not comparable to the prosecution and the work of Scooter Libby, although your prior guest would have liked to make that comparison. These are real people that we're talking about. They're not some amorphous blob of an army that we don't know who they are. They're people with families. We have got to make sure that we leave the number of troops over there to train the Iraqis to stand up on their own, put pressure on the Iraqi government to begin to operate on their own and be able to function as an independent government, and know that they are not going to have a never-ending amount of support from the United States of America. At some point soon, we need to bring those troops home. I voted in favor of the last Iraq War supplemental.
Thank you very much.
We've got to make sure we bring these troops home as soon as possible.
Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz from vacation in Manchester, New Hampshire, and Congressman Dan Burton from Indianapolis. Thank you both.